In a cabin in the middle of the forest in North Carolina, two people live, a woman named Nydia and her blind son, Solomon. The only thing left from Solomon's father, a hunter, is an audio recording in which he explains to the boy that they moved to this place in hopes that Nydia would recover. However, their hope was in vain, as her condition only worsened. One day, Nydia calls Solomon to check the traps. Before leaving the house, he habitually ties a rope to his belt, with the other end attached to the porch. This precaution ensures that Solomon can always find his way back and that Nydia knows where to look for him if something goes wrong. She teaches him how to set traps and retrieve animals, and she's impressed with how quickly he learns. Later, she shows him how to skin animals without damaging the fur, which they use to make clothing. On one occasion, Solomon catches an insect and traps it in a jar, only to feel sad when he notices that the beetle stops moving. Nydia explains that living creatures need air, food, and water to survive. Another day, she suggests they go fishing to celebrate his late father's birthday. The idea excites Solomon, as fishing was one of his father's favorite activities. As they reach the river, he notices an eerie silence, with all the animals and birds seemingly gone. His mother jokingly blames him for scaring them away, but the unsettling feeling stays with him. Sitting by the shore, he asks Nydia questions about death. Surprised, she explains that death is like a transformation, similar to a chrysalis turning into a butterfly. Solomon, though young, seems unusually preoccupied with the topic. After a while, without catching any fish, Nydia suggests he dig for worms to use as bait. Solomon ventures deeper into the forest, finding worms near a decayed tree, and feels an iron chain beneath the leaves. As he tries to pull it, his mother arrives, sensing something suspicious nearby. Praising him for finding the worms, she suggests they end their fishing trip early and return home. Back at the cabin, Nydia resumes her chores, tending to the garden and the goat that provides them with milk. Solomon helps by digging up root vegetables. In the evening, she bakes a cake and encourages him to sing a traditional song, but Solomon isn't fond of it. She then lets him blow out the candle, which he does without revealing his wish, believing it won't come true if he shares it. That night, they listen to an old recording of a story she and Solomon's father made for him. In it, they recount the tale of a little goat that wandered into a forest where a monster lived. The goat managed to escape and brought joy to his worried parents, promising never to return to the dark forest. After listening, Solomon asks about death again, as he didn't fully understand her earlier explanation. Nydia speaks of faith, but he struggles to understand, concluding instead that he believes in his mother above all else. Years pass, and one day Nydia disappears, leaving Solomon a recording of her voice as a goodbye. She reminds him of 3 rules. He must always share with the forest, giving it half of everything he takes. When feeling down, he should sing their song, and he must never take off the rope. Time goes on, and Solomon grows into a teenager, fully adapted to life alone. He hunts, fishes, chops wood, and checks the traps on his own. Whenever he feels especially lonely, he listens to recordings of his parents' voices. One day, while eating near the cabin, Solomon hears a strange noise from the forest. Putting down his plate, he rushes toward the sound but finds nothing unusual, though he senses someone nearby. That night, he listens to his mother's recording again but finds it difficult to sleep. He gets up and leaves the cabin, only to hear his goats frightened bleating. He follows the sound until the rope reaches its limit. At the edge of the rope's reach, he touches the goat's body in the grass, but then something unseen grabs the animal and drags it into the forest. Feeling his hands, Solomon realizes they're covered in blood and tries to wipe them clean. The next morning, Solomon is frightened but continues his daily routine. One day, he suddenly hears a gunshot in the forest and rushes toward the sound, stumbling upon a dead deer. But then a man emerges from the trees, claiming the deer as his kill. Frightened, Solomon begins to wave his knife, and the stranger is forced to knock him out with the butt of his rifle. The boy regains consciousness near his house, where the hunter, sitting across from him, is tending to his wound and apologizing for the harm caused. Noticing the name Lucas on the knife, the man assumes it's the boy's name, but Solomon clarifies that it was his father's name, and that his father is now gone. The hunter apologizes again, explaining he didn't mean to scare him. Noticing the rope around Solomon, he reveals that he carried him back to the house. Introducing himself as Hank, the hunter asks why Solomon lives alone and where his parents are, as the boy appears very young. Solomon, however, does not answer. With night approaching, Hank requests permission to stay in the house, offering some painkillers in return. Solomon declines, unfamiliar with pills, so Hank instead promises to make a hot meal from the deer, to which Solomon agrees. Inside the house, Hank observes that Solomon has never left its boundaries and therefore knows nothing of the outside world. Meanwhile, Solomon huddles in his room, listening to his mother's last message and feeling uncomfortable with the stranger's presence. Hank discovers some handmade books that Solomon's mother created for him and feels sorry for the boy. He behaves kindly, offering Solomon the soup he's prepared. Again, Hank proposes to help him adjust to the outside world, saying he can introduce him to other people. Solomon declines, which Hank assumes is due to his deep attachment to his home, lamenting that he himself has never had a place to call home. He then asks about Solomon's parents, noting that he resembles the woman in the photograph, perhaps his mother. After dinner, they go to bed, though Solomon keeps his knife close. But, realizing Hank poses no threat, he eventually relaxes and lies down. In the middle of the night, however, both are jolted awake by a loud, terrifying sound, resembling the roar of some unknown creature. Armed with a flashlight and rifle, Hank steps outside to investigate. It's quiet around the house, so he ventures into the forest, where he soon finds traces of blood at the base of a tree, realizing that some animal has been killed there. The tree's bark is also scratched and marked with blood. Surveying the area through a scope, Hank notices something suspicious in the bushes. He fires, but the creature suddenly leaps from behind a tree with a chilling roar and charges at him. Realizing he missed, the hunter runs back toward the house. Reaching safety, he finds Solomon in a trance-like state, swaying from side to side and humming to himself, unresponsive to Hank's questions. Receiving no answers, Hank leaves him alone, convinced that he's scared off the beast and that they are now safe. The following morning, Hank finds Solomon in the shed and offers to help repair it, as they have all the necessary materials, except for a chain. Solomon recalls finding a chain in the forest as a child and leads Hank to the spot, impressing him with his ability to navigate by the rope. The boy explains that it's the only way to survive. Soon, they find the spot. Hank, noticing the chain, grabs it and starts pulling, but realizing it's tied to something, he follows it and finds some kind of burrow nearby with metal shears, surprising him. However, he cuts off a piece of the chain and returns with it to the house. While Hank works on repairs, Solomon asks for a piece of venison, and with permission, he throws it into the bushes. To the hunter's surprise, the boy explains it's a rule. Everything taken from the forest must be shared with it, as his parents taught him. The hunter believes this practice might explain the appearance of the beast they heard at night. He suggests setting a trap for the creature to ensure Solomon's safety and also extends a rope, giving the young man the ability to explore new areas. Soon, they both head in the direction where Hank saw the unknown beast, cautiously moving between the trees. They reach the edge of a previously marked area, when suddenly, something unknown grabs the rope and starts pulling Solomon. The terrified hunter chases after him, and upon catching up, he leads the shaken Solomon back to the house. Hank tries to reassure the boy, promising that the beast won't enter the house and that they'll catch it with the traps they set. He also finds Solomon's mother's diary and offers to read it to him. Solomon listens intently, a thoughtful smile on his face, as he hears lines filled with love and tenderness directed at him. But suddenly, Hank stops reading mid-sentence, having read something terrifying. Not wanting to scare Solomon, he tells him it's late and that they should go to sleep. As always, Solomon listens to his mother's recording before bed, then falls asleep. Meanwhile, Hank, making sure the boy is asleep, leaves the house and returns to the place where they found the chain. There, he finds a pile of gnawed bones in front of the burrow and realizes it's the beast's lair. Meanwhile, Solomon wakes up and begins to search for his new friend. Hank, with his rifle ready, approaches the burrow and notices a notebook similar to the one in Solomon's house, though this one is filled with simple doodles. Thinking the notebook has no value, he leaves it. Realizing Hank is missing, Solomon sits on the porch and turns on the tape recorder, listening to his mother's voice. At that moment, he hears a gunshot in the forest. Finding the rope, Solomon runs into the forest and stumbles upon Hank's backpack, realizing he's somewhere nearby. For the first time in his life, Solomon breaks the rule and takes off the rope to find his friend. Crawling around, he finds Hank's lifeless body. Solomon mourns his loss, but then hears someone standing before him. The terrifying, disheveled creature is revealed to be Solomon's mother, making inhuman sounds as she charges at him, but the chain restrains her. To drive away his fear, Solomon begins to hum the childhood melody, which makes her pause. When she starts humming along, he recognizes her. He cautiously approaches, but when she lunges at him, she impales herself on a knife and dies. Her strange, vertical-pupiled eyes go still. The young man, coughing heavily, leans against a tree, trying to recover from all he's been through. Suddenly, he hears a crow's call and looks up at the sky. He realizes that he, too, has inherited his mother's illness as vertical pupils appear in his milky eyes, marking him as the new forest beast. A dark, haunting film that exudes hopelessness, coldness, and a sense of inevitable futility, but the metaphor of the rope is apt. A person should never lose their connection to home. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.